Harold Strong. I'm president of the Medical Innovation Collaborative. We're located in North Texas. A lot of the conversation we're having now is related to of the life sciences ecosystem for our region. And part of that is the strength of consultants that we have to help companies as they get ready to enter the market. We really have a great conversation today with Bobbi Drais. She's a consultant focused in regulatory support, and I'll bring up right now. Say good morning.
Hello. Hi.
It's good to see you, Bobbi. Thanks so much for being with me today. As you may have heard, the conversation is to learn more about you and the role you play here in North Texas and globally, I suppose, providing company support with your consultant. Welcome and thanks for being here.
Thank you. It's nice to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you and to tell you a little bit about myself.
Wonderful. So let's start with an origin story. How did you get to where you are now? You're a consultant. I'm certain that meant that you did a lot of time before you just putting out your own jingle. Tell us about that.
Sure. So I've been in the industry almost 30 years. It's crazy when I think about it that it's been that long. My background is science. So I have a bachelor's in biology and a master's of science in pathogenic microbiology. And I really didn't know what I wanted to do when I got out of school, in all honesty. But I had the opportunity. I got my master's from the University of South Florida in Tampa. And I had the opportunity to start working in industry with Smith & Nephew, a medical device company there in Florida. They focused on wound care specifically. And they needed a microbiologist to start their laboratories because they had no R&D or quality labs. So I was hired on there to start, everything from scratch, from the micro point of view. And it was my first foray into industry. I didn't know anything about industry. So it was a really good opportunity. It was very challenging. And after about a year there, they asked me if I wanted to join the regulatory affairs department because they needed some help. So I didn't even know what regulatory was, and I just kind of fell into it. And I started, there with things like over-the-counter drugs and medical devices, specifically in the wound care, skin care space. And I worked there for about 5 or 6 years. I continued to have the responsibility for microbiology. That was one of the deals that was made, that I would continue to manage the lab. We ended up, I think we were at 3 shifts by the time I left there.
Wow.
But I continued to grow in regulatory and was able to work not only with the US FDA, but also with European colleagues. So I got a really good base on the medical device side. And had the opportunity to come to Texas. I worked for a very small wound care company here in Texas for about a year called Carrington Laboratories. And then, in Irving, And then had the opportunity to move to Galderma Laboratories in the dermatological space and in the prescription drug space. And there I really was able to learn a lot about drug development. I had responsibilities for various products for acne, psoriasis, atopic dermatitis, where we were taking the products from the cradle to the grave. So working at, developing them, interacting with the health authorities, doing clinical studies, everything that needed to be done, developing the dossiers to get those products approved. So I learned a tremendous amount with regards to the drug development world. I had some really good mentors. I was very fortunate to have folks that had been in the regulatory world for 30 years. Wow, when I think about it now, that's how long I've been in it now. So that's kind of scary when I think.
So you started at 5, right?
Yeah,
you started at 5.
I did. Thank you. Yes. But so it's really about the people that I worked with that really helped me learn and helped me to develop that passion. And after Galderma, I had the opportunity to come to a small startup here in Fort Worth called HealthPoint. They needed to start their regulatory department. They were a company. The parent company is DFB Pharmaceuticals, which is still here in the area today. And they were building up a branded company. They already had a contract manufacturing organization in San Antonio. and they were building their branded company out, and they were at the point where they needed to have the inside work, the support inside. So I went over there as director of regulatory affairs and started that group. We were into skincare, surgical care, and dermatology, wound care. We ended up divesting of several of our businesses to focus on the wound care. And I moved into the vice president position. I had responsible for quality. I was responsible for quality as well for a period of time. But we really made the shift to move from the device side of wound care to biologics and pharma. And so we were working with therapeutic proteins, recombinant proteins, cell therapy products, and we're working through developing and really growing the company. And we had tremendous amount of success within the organization. And we were acquired by, ironically, Smith & Nephew back in 2012. So I worked for Smith & Nephew again, and some of the same people were still there. So that was very nice to work with folks that I had worked with, years and years before. And with Smith & Nephew, as always with, acquisition came challenges, reorganization. We reorged, and I ended up being the vice president of regulatory affairs for the wound care business worldwide. So I ended up with teams in, here in Texas, in Florida, in the UK, and in Japan. So really had a lot of fun. Reorganization is always hard for everybody, but really had a lot of fun building new teams and, learning different cultures and being really able to bring some great products to market for the wound care space, which there's still so much unmet need. Yeah. And then I had the opportunity to go back to Galderma and head up the regulatory for their prescription business unit, the strategic part. And I made that decision. They were working in monoclonal antibodies in rare diseases and orphan diseases, and it was something that was really interesting to me. So I went back there for 3 years, and I made the decision last year and actually pulled the trigger at the beginning of 2020 to go out on my own with consulting. It had nothing to do with any company I worked with, but it was that, I had been at the executive level for quite a while, which comes with a lot of stress, a tremendous amount of travel, and I was really getting farther and farther removed from doing regulatory. I was getting more into, the administrative reorg budgets, it comes with that role. Right, but I was really missing regulatory. I was missing time at home with my family, and I made that decision to start consulting. And I started in February, and I have been loving it. I really am enjoying it, and keep thinking, why haven't I started it sooner? Right.
Well, that's exciting for a couple of different reasons. A, the depth and breadth of exposure experiences that you were able to gain over the time. The opportunity to get exposed to some really new things.
Yeah.
But more than that can be conveyed to the people that you consult with now. And those relationships are critical. I don't know how you would equate knowledge to relationships, but your network is vast and deep as well. So companies who need support from the things that you offer would also benefit from the people you know.
Absolutely. And I found that already, as I've been working with companies that may need somebody to help with reimbursement, or may need somebody from the quality side, that just because of the colleagues over the years that I've had, many of whom are out there consulting now, or even if they're not, they use consultants as well. So, I can reach out to them with whatever organization that they're with to say, hey, who are you working with? Who can you recommend? And I've, in a short time, really been able to marry up some other functions with companies too, just because of the network. And it's gone, both ways, in that those folks have brought me on to projects too. So, we may have worked together at companies years ago, and here we are working on the same project as consultants. So it's fun. Yeah.
So who do you have a persona or a profile of or profiles of customers that are using your service right now? What is that customer? Who is that company? Who is that entrepreneur? Or can you put them in a container like that to profile them?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's hard to say that my customer is A or B, because I work with a variety of customers. I work with big pharma, so they may have a new project coming on board that they don't have the resource to handle initially. So I'll help, I help do the diligence or onboard it and fill that gap until they're able to find the internal resource or to hire additional folks. So I work with big pharma. I work with, medical device companies of various sizes. I also, really am helping. There's a couple things going on right now where it's spin-offs or subsets from the university settings, to where they have an idea, they have a product, and they're not quite sure what they need to do next, and where it needs to go from a regulatory point of view, how they can put it on the market. So it really is a variety of customers and clients, which makes it fun because, the bigger companies, they already know the steps and know what should be done. So I'm filling a role there of helping, foster or shepherd something through their process. But the smaller companies, or even companies that are getting into a new space, it's part of, training and trying to educate and help them learn about what needs to be done to ultimately have that success with the regulators and to get a product cleared or approved.
And that makes sense from the corporate perspective because you are almost a department in a box. You've gone from the beginning to the executive level, so they can just hand you an idea and you can go through the whole process of evaluation, troubleshooting, a final report on the expectation of success or challenges, and that is just comfort to them that a professional like you can step in and provide that service. So the unmet need is they can really manage their bottom line and define quality based on the experience that you bring to the table.
No, absolutely. A lot of what I do is there's a concept, and it's that strategy of what is the right pathway to move with a regulator? Is a product a device? Is it an over-the-counter drug? Is it a prescription drug? And they all have different pathways to market. So it's that strategy aspect. But then there's also the task. I help a lot of companies actually, and which is one of my favorite things to do, is with due diligence, as I mentioned earlier, really going out and assessing technologies that they're looking at to look at, okay, what is the value that it brings? Where does it stand from that regulatory point of view? But then also another thing that I really enjoy doing, that I've been doing quite frequently, is helping companies prepare for meetings and hold meetings with the regulators, because it's a very concise, specialized way that you need to do that to have the ultimate success. And there's a lot of planning that is involved in getting you to that point. So, it's a little bit of everything that I do. I even, for some companies, that need some help, some like small companies need some help with reviewing promotional materials for the market, because that's all regulated by the FDA. I am helping do that as well. And that's some of the things I did the first time in regulatory almost 30 years ago. So, I've been lucky to have had a lot of different experiences with a lot of different product classification types, that it's really, helped to give me that breadth so I can help folks on a broader basis.
And it's those smaller companies that I think that truly benefit from this, because when you're working with a larger company, the balance sheet can cover time and effort, and you can go to the depths and the detail necessary to give comfort to everyone in the department up and down the chain. But if I'm a smaller company, burn rate is obviously something that I have to keep an eye on.
Right.
So the ability for you to come in a very concentrated amount of time, deliver a product to them that helps make a decision that can either save or make them money, that's a tremendous benefit to them. So I can kind of see both sides of that.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think a lot of it is too, the smaller companies that, we touched on it earlier, is the learning curve
Yeah.
of what needs to be done and when, and
Right.
and not, get all the way down the road and then realize that there's documentation you should have been keeping track of. There's testing you could have done earlier that would have helped, with speeding up that approval process. So
Right.
it's all part of the learning aspect. Yes.
And I think, implicitly in this last little bit of a discussion, we talked about the gap or the unmet need that these companies have, right? So we know the customer, we've discussed their unmet need, so that's pretty clear. What about gaps? It sounds like part of the gap may be workforce or folks who have the experience to assist both large and small companies. I'm not asking for competition from your perspective.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
more
you're right, though.
workforce you have, the more companies that would come to the region to benefit from what we're doing and where we're going. Does that make sense?
Yes, no, I agree, and I think it's for them to know who's out there.
Right.
And I'm not saying that because I'm a consultant, but I know even when I've been in industry and have been trying to find somebody specialized, whether it be on the quality side, whether it be on the compliance side, regulatory. It's where do you start? Where
Right.
do you find those individuals, and how do you know if somebody is the right individual and the right fit for you? So, I think it's a combination of the education of knowing what gaps they have,
Right.
and there's a lot that can be done to, to help bring them up to speed with regards to, here's some things you need to think about, the areas you need to think about as you're developing a product, but then also how to fill those gaps and where to go, and having those networks to tap into,
Sure.
I think is very, very important, because like I said, I know I've struggled at times trying to find specialists in the regulatory affairs world for something that's very specialized, a very unique situation. It's hard to find and to network and to be able to identify that group or that person to help you.
We have some great universities in the region and outside of our region who have some interesting intellectual property for licensing that could be, spun up by companies in the region.
Mm-hmm.
But critical to that is the ability to reach out to someone like you to assist them in that process. Because one of the big things is to fail early, right?
Yeah.
If you can get your arms around something to determine yay or nay in terms of this is something we can translate and commercialize, or this isn't something, part of that comes from having the right professionals around the table to assist you in making those hard calls. So that I believe is one of the areas that may be a gap in our region. But can you recognize other things in the region that may be a challenge in this space, or areas where we may need to pay attention to bring more value to or attention to?
Yeah, I think, and I don't think it's just our region. I think it's just in general is, when let's take the university setting. There's so many great ideas that are coming out of the university settings, right? But sometimes they don't have the understanding or the exposure as to what to do with that idea from the whole process, from the development point of view. And so to me, I think having some sort of curriculum that talks about how to put a product on the market, and you cover everything from development, design, regulatory, quality, safety, testing, then commercialization, right? And it's to help them be aware that there are these things that, yes, you have a great design, but there's things that you can do early on to really start to set the stage in the way that would behoove you as you move through developing it and either starting a spin-off or wanting to license it. I think the universities do a great job with patent, and they are able to understand that, and I don't think that's an issue. But I think that we all could stand for having that exposure at the university level for those folks that are in the development world to really be able to understand that full process and to just keep some of those things in mind. It doesn't need to be anything, detailed, but it's to really understand device and drug development and commercialization.
I said we slightly. I spent a few years in university world and commercialization and collaboration and partnerships. But there's a lot of time spent around how to put together an SBIR or how to proceed with funding or pursue funding both publicly and privately. So it's almost the proverbial, the dog catches the car, now what do I do with it, right?
Right.
So now that we know how to put a good proposal together and we've licensed the technology, to your point, what do we do with that now? How do we know what gates, what process we need to follow to ensure that this is something that makes sense? So that's pretty cool. But while we're having this conversation, your market is changing exponentially, overnight for the most part, in terms of, now we have Wi-Fi or Bluetooth monitoring of devices. That's a hackable kind of thing. How do we secure that? Is that a cyber? Is that a blockchain? How do we manage that piece to maintain HIPAA certification around this product so that it's not hacked? Similarly, clinical trials are, kind of developing and growing, and there's a lot of new applications of artificial intelligence that will allow you to leverage the results of some clinical trial results so that you can get to market faster. And then the pharma process, I think, is also kind of changing where instead of waiting on testing, we're looking at what the patients feel as we go forward to the market. So how would you address those things, especially from a new company coming into to the marketplace who may not be aware of those and probably several other changes that are going on?
Yeah, I think all three of those examples are very important because they really are the future of the industry. You're seeing more and more across all product types, the artificial intelligence. You're seeing, the like you say, the Bluetooth, and the regulators are now starting to really look at, okay, what does this mean? And for example, medical devices and cybersecurity, the FDA has come out with numerous guidances and regulations about how to do that and protect the data, protect the integrity, and protect the patient. So I think that it's an evolving world, and I think that early developers really need to understand that, yes, while it's important from the technology point of view, right, the personal data protection point of view, but that there also are those requirements now coming down from the regulators that may be different from other standards of design. And I think it's just part of the changing world. In fact, I was just talking with somebody earlier this week. We were talking about patient preference and patient-reported outcomes. And it really is a mandate and high on the FDA's list right now of things that they really are wanting to listen to the patient voice, et cetera. And that has changed. So even in the past 15 to 20 years, I can remember going to the FDA and talking about a quality of life survey we wanted to have included in the clinical study. And the FDA was like, well, that's fine. It's good. You can do whatever with that because it really has no utility from a regulatory point of view. Oh, wow. And so they really have changed, which is to benefit, obviously, the patient, because it is important to, understand what the patient thinks, what the patient defines as success, and how they're being protected through the whole development process. So you're seeing a big shift from a regulatory and an oversight point of view in the last, I would say, 5 years, and I think it's just going to continue to shift. So it's something that the whole industry needs to pay very close attention to.
And it seems like EU is being very aggressive on a lot of these changes that will impact what we do here in the States. Well, what are your thoughts around that, and how do you think this shakes out over time?
Yeah, I totally agree. The EU has always been a little bit ahead of the FDA with regards to patient protection, data privacy, also transparency, because there's a lot of initiatives now where more and more of clinical trial results are going to be made public. At more level of detail, more information about the adverse events that are seen during trials, more information on design applications. So it's something that Europe is on the forefront of, and FDA is following behind. They're a little bit behind. They're not at the same level, but I think, now too, you're not just necessarily developing a product for the U.S. market. It's global. So where the U.S. may lead in some aspects and Europe and others, you've really got to look at it from your whole global product development and how to meet those requirements. Because the last thing you want to do is to develop a product for one market and then realize that you still have a lot of work to do for the second market or the third market. And so you want to be able to put all of that into your development plan, because, when you, especially on the drug side, when you're talking about the studies that you have to do for drugs and biologics, the clinical studies, that it's best to do those with many markets in mind and get that input from the regulators so that you only have to do several studies versus specific studies per region.
Right. So I've been reading recently about the EU MDR project that's going on in the EU, and the objective, I guess, is to monitor things that have been in the process in terms of procedures, hip replacements, those kinds of things, to ensure that they know where the product is. That eventually comes to the FDA in the U.S. market, I'm assuming. Is there a timeline on that yet, or has that been determined?
So with the EU MDR, that's replacing the Medical Device Directive, which was something that was not a regulation. It was a directive that was implied or applied at a national level. Now with the MDR, which is the Medical Device Regulation, the European authorities, EMA, has said this is the regulation now that needs to be followed, must be filed to the letter of the law. And it did come because of, say, some safety issues, some challenges with the notified bodies who actually were responsible for reviewing and placing on the market. I think that from the device point of view, the way Europe is going now, with it being under a regulation, is more aligned with what the FDA has done. And it's very similar in what you would need to do to place something on the market. And there are some things that Europe gets much more in detail about than the FDA. Some of the things that I've alluded to and we've talked about already. But they are getting more aligned, but they're not quite there yet. On the drugs and biologics side, they're much more aligned through the ICH aspect. But on the devices, it's not quite there yet.
Got it. All right, so now time for the hard questions. This is just warming up until we get to this point. So what do you do for fun?
Oh, pre-COVID or COVID?
Yeah, that's a good comeback. That is a great question. So let's assume we're in fairyland and say pre-COVID.
I love to travel. I say that, and I was talking about all the travel I had to do with my job. But I love to experience new places, new cultures, new foods, new wines. I really do love to travel, and it's been hard with COVID. We, as I'm sure everybody else, had trips planned that we've had to, cancel or postpone. But I'm also a homebody. I mean, I love going back. I'm from Pennsylvania, so I love going back and visiting my family there. It's, in the middle of nowhere. It's very rural and quiet and gorgeous in the mountains. And, that's not vacation, that's going home. So
yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So post-COVID, we talked pre. Now that we're in the middle of it, how have we adapted to find some joy out of this? Yeah.
So I've always been into games, board games and things, but now in COVID, and so our little bubble has included our neighbors. And so we have taken full advantage of board games and, game nights and game days there at the beginning when it was cold and dreary and raining, we have a lot of fun playing games and new games, old games that we, grew up with. So it's been a lot of fun, and that I know will continue. That will continue.
It looks like we have a little more good at those board games until the near future, at least.
I think so. Yeah.
This has been fun. Thanks so much for your time today. sharing. If you're just joining us, we were talking to a regulatory consultant with tremendous experiences, both from a device and pharmaceutical perspective. Been a lot of fun. Again, my name is Harold Strong. I'm with Medical Innovation Collaborative, and we really thank you for joining us today. Have a great day. Thanks.
Bye.